Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the mic working? Great. Okay. Well, I first must thank, as many of you know, Dr. Ken Ford and his wife Nancy and everyone at the Institute. I have been inspired all day by being here. But I really want to thank everyone who's made my stay incredible. I've been able to get introduced to the community as well. So I really give a warm thank you to Ken and Nancy and everyone at the Institute. So thank you very much. I only have about 45 minutes or so, but I think I'd try to keep you here for hours. I do want to just say how delighted I am to be here to share a subject or a topic that I'm deeply passionate about, and that's birds in general, if there are any strong birders here, and certainly raptors in particular. And I'll begin a little bit with the title. So if the goal at the end of the day is to really talk about conservation and how do I personally become a better conservationist or one to really contribute to the natural world. How can I do something? And the way to best probably do that is to just try to share tonight some stories about what I've been doing and how those stories interweave with all the work that I've done as a field biologist and as a member of this small little Raptor Conservation and Education Center in Jackson. So if any of you want to come through, I'll talk more about that. But you'll see at the end, you all, I'm just trying to get at how can we do the most good with the least amount of work and resources, which is really what we have. We have plenty of time. And that's to get more a message to the greater amount of people. And if all the research that I've done and the publications that we've all put out, probably many of you here, it's all great. And I've done that, and I've realized that very few people read it, fewer than I wish. And so I thought, okay, we have to be able to get more people to understand just a little bit. And I'll start and I'll finish with how can we all just see more birds? Okay, and birds is the topic, but it's also sort of a metaphor for how do we engage in the natural environment. And I personally have dedicated my life, I guess, to what's going on out there and how do I pay attention. And I've found that it's through the eyes of a wild animal. Okay, and there are many times that I've been in groups with a big eagle or a falcon or an owl, and I've had a few folks go, "What is that?" And I'm standing there with this big horned owl that's trying to eat my ear off, and we're all good. Everyone's okay. No one's dying. And I go, "Oh, this is a great opportunity." You go, "Well, we have big owls, and we have little ones where we live, and the way and they're going, and they go, "Wait a minute. Yeah, what is that?" And I'm standing here like this, and I'm like, this is an owl. It's like, a what? So I've taken that experience to go, okay, we got to back up. We can't just go, okay, I can tell you all about the science and the neurology of these birds, but it doesn't matter. We're not hearing that. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to just share stories that I think will, at the end of this evening, bring it together, that just says there are simple things we can do to just sort of tune in to the natural world. And if we can sort of dehumanize it for just a little bit and start seeing. So it's those stories that have helped me and hopefully that I want to share with you all. So we'll start real quickly. What is a raptor? Okay, these are big birds. They're charismatic. They have big talons on their feet. They have to have a curved bill. And the third thing is they only have one food item on their menu, and that's meat, right? And primarily they'll eat live things. The stimulus to try to go kill something is the movement. And if birds get hungry enough, some anyway, they will eat carrion, dead things. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So they also exhibit this awkward sort of physiology of what we call reverse sexual dimorphism. The female of all raptors, of all birds of prey, are bigger, heavier, larger. Some would say stronger. I'm also a falconer, so we'll watch how female and male raptors fly, and they do fly a little differently. Okay, and we're talking this evening about the group of owls, falcons, hawks, eagles, and then these osprey, which you all have lots of here. Okay, and they sit out there in their own kind of funny world. Okay, so raptors are more than just these big, charismatic birds, and why do we care? And what makes these birds such incredible resources for education and conservation? Well, again, if we just said they're beautiful birds with talons, hooked beaks, and they have these tiny, they have these tiny little dinosaur brains. These are like archaic animals still flying around thinking they got to go kill things. And if you think about that for a while, that's a pretty remarkable approach to life. So, but they're also truly what we call a bellwether, and many of you know this. These truly indicate to us what's going on in the natural world. Okay, from the prey base, lots of these are little mice, shrews, voles, rabbits. They're eating grass and vegetation. And if they're not there, the vegetation's not there, and these aren't here. Okay, so and it's sort of a cliche. Many books will say, oh, they're bellwethers, they're canary in the coal mine. They truly are. If they're not there, which we'll talk about, then that means some other pieces of the puzzle aren't there as well. Okay, so tonight I want to talk about a little bit about raptors, just real quickly, the science, okay? And again, I'm trying to see these birds through a number of different lenses, through science, through educators. There's a gorgeous young girl here at 10. I'm looking at her going, what is she seeing? And that's our future right there. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on in there, and we're trying to see what are good, effective conservation measures, okay? Science is one piece of it. I want to share with you how we built a little program, what those programs consisted of, and then the idea of conservation and the people that are engaged in this. It keeps coming back to all of us here, and any one of you would be one of about 80 or 100 volunteers that we have at our little Raptor Center. This is it. You guys are in it. So, okay, I'll just back up. Where are we? I'm in the western United States. I hope many of you have been out here. We're in what's called the Rocky Mountain chain, and I only point that out because this is a massive raptor highway, okay, twice a year. The spring and fall migration is going right through here. And right in the middle of that landlocked photo is where we are. And that's Yellowstone National Park is to the north. The green to the south is Grand Teton National Park. Okay, two crown jewels. And then this yellow line is what we call the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. All right, and that's going to play a role throughout the evening. And a little closer view. So this is about the exact size of Alabama, okay, widthwise and lengthwise. And if you can imagine 2/3 of Alabama as a public land, that's what we have here. So this consists of of 7 national forests, 2 national parks, I should say. One national forest is the largest in the lower 48. We have 3 wilderness areas and 3 national wildlife refuges. So there's a tremendous amount of public land here still. And many would argue we're chipping away at it, lots and lots and lots. And I would argue in 2015, we're still doing okay. And that doesn't mean there aren't threats. But I'm going to use this as an example of, and what many biologists will say, this is one of the last remaining relatively intact ecosystems in the lower 48. It's right here, okay? And that would tell us, and the reason we say that is that we have grizzly bears, we have black bears, mountain lions, a whole suite of predators, predatory birds, prey base, and vegetation maps. Okay, so it's still here. Those animals wouldn't be here if that wasn't there. Okay, so this is where I'm coming from. I've come a long way, and I'm excited to share that with you. And what does it look like from the land? Our little valley, Jackson Hole, named after a valley, okay, is about 35 miles north to south and about 10 miles wide. To the left side of the photo is Idaho. The Grand Teton Mountains, what we call the Teton Range, is almost on the Idaho-Wyoming border. And to the right side, what we call to the east, is a massive sort of mountain mosaic of different peaks and mountainous country with spruce fir type forests and river riparian areas and so forth. So Jackson Hole is to the south of the park, just 10 miles. To the north, you see Yellowstone Park and Yellowstone Lake. So that gives us a reference of where we are. This is, again, a very important area, not just for us. I know UNESCO, which some of you might be familiar with, has declared this Yellowstone and its surrounding regions as a World Heritage Site. So on a global scale, people are recognizing this for its significant value. Okay, a great study area to have. It's a beautiful place. The vegetation types that are here, right, what we call habitats, are all here. But really what's most important to you all is the juxtaposition, how they're arranged to one another that allows these animals to move around and move through them in a safe way. So the Jackson Hole Valley is split right down the middle by the Snake River, this beautiful riparian area that is changing. It was about 100% cottonwood. It's now turning into a spruce forest, which is alarming to many of us. But, and it's, again, this idea of large open landscapes, undisturbed, relatively. And in it, okay, we have, 14, almost 20 to 21 species of raptors that are nesting. We have 30 to 32 species that are there year-round, or will come at one point of the year that aren't necessarily nesting. So why so many birds? Let's just take a minute and think about that. So now I'm going to try to, okay, let's start thinking like a raptor. What do I need to do in order to make a living here? Okay, we have to coexist. That's the first thing. I've now shown you that there are a lot of birds. They're all trying to kill the same thing, for more or less, okay? And they're all in the same area. So there's a couple things. We have to ensure that we have the resource. Are there large-scale habitat types there? Massive amounts of sagebrush. We have many ground nesting birds. We have spruce fir forests. We have riparian. They're all there, okay? So that's the first piece. It's like, okay. The next thing is we have to think about how are we going to partition what's there. Let's take a big piece of pie, cut it up enough so that all these birds get enough to eat. Okay, and if you think about that, owls, maybe they all sat around the round table years ago and said, okay, I want mice and voles too, and the red-tails are going to beat me up during the day, so I'll take them at night. So the partitioning might be not just who's going to eat what, but when and at what scale. Okay, so now we have falcons that said, I'm just going to pick birds right out of the sky. All right, owls that say, I'll take them at night. Okay, hawks that say, well, I'll sit on poles and we'll chase one another around and I'll grab a couple ground squirrels. Eagles said, great, I'll just steal whatever the osprey catch, and everybody's happy. Okay, so that's really what's going on out there. Okay, and I'm not going to try to anthropomorphize everything, but you spend 30 years and you watch these things and you go, that's the goofiest thing I've ever seen happen. Birds, so at any rate, it is an enjoyable, wonderful field to be in. So, okay, let's think about choices. Now, birds making choices in those little dinosaur brains, I don't know. But if we think on a hierarchical scale, okay, one of our biologists at the center has mounted little high-definition cameras on the backs of these falcons that we're training. And they got up there, there's 4 or 5 of them flying around and filming one another. This happens to be a photo from that. So this is a falcon being taken a picture from another falcon. So let's just pretend in the spring, these are migrants. They come into the valley just like they would come up across the ocean up and start hitting this whole part of Florida. They're at 10,000 feet, and they're flying from the south into Jackson Hole, and they're seeing clear into the north end of Yellowstone Park. Okay, they're seeing probably 80 miles to the north. And the bird's flying in here saying, okay, I need to find a place to nest. I need to build a nest. I have to defend it. I have to try to find food and a mate, and let's have babies and let's get going. All right, so it's going to start at maybe, let's just say, 10,000 feet. And then it comes down a little bit. Let's say now we're at 6,000 feet, and I know that when I have my babies in mid-June, there's going to be the same time, probably 30 species of shorebirds are going to be having their babies. Perfect. This is just what I want, okay? So I'm going to find a river bottom, because I know on the sides of rivers there might be cliffs. I don't want to build stick nests. I'm just going to find a scrape, as many of you know about falcons. Great. Nice cliff area. Now I'm kind of down, 100, 200 feet up, and I'm like, how do I decide there? Okay? So if any bird, okay, it could be the robin in our backyard, that bird is back there making choices, and they're all on some level of hierarchical scaling. All right? And in this case, well, this is right off the Snake River, and we would watch this pair of peregrines all summer long from a little blind. And sure enough, when those baby shorebirds started hatching, they would take off. And if you know peregrines, you know that, and they'd take off over our head, and 5 minutes later come back with some dead-looking something, and cram it into one of these crevices and nooks in that cliff wall. And they did this for 3.5 weeks straight. There were probably hundreds of birds they never touched. Okay, and you go, what's going on here? And it's probably that little raptorial predatory brain that says, if it moves, kill it. And that's what we watched. And sure enough, those babies were more than happy, fledged 2 birds. But that's starting to think, what's going on out there? Any of us could see this. We can watch this, not a problem at all. Okay, the science piece. So where did my work go? I'll try to move through this quickly. I'm out doing raptor nest surveys in Grand Teton National Park. And I find this at the base of a tree. It's a downy little dead raptor. I knew it had talons. It had a little curved beak. It's probably 2 weeks old. And I go, what's going on here? Okay, that's all I knew. Found this in 13 nests, dead little downy babies at the bottom of the nest. Okay, climbed a nest. Found a dead downy little bird at 20 days old with 3 ground squirrels and 2 pocket gophers in the nest. Okay, so mom and dad are still seeing a visual cue in that nest and going, oh my gosh, I have a baby. It hasn't moved, but I'm going to keep feeding it. Something's wrong. That's all I knew. I could shut the program off and ask you all what happened. Okay, that's all we had. So let's look at how the science process works and the field science. And here we are in Grand Teton National Park. I knew that they were red-tailed hawks. They were babies. They were in probably, ostensibly, the most protected landscape in North America, right? A park. And the most common raptor in North America. It didn't match. Okay, this shouldn't be happening. All right? So I wrote a grant, got some money, and said, okay, why are these birds dying in a national park? Okay, we don't have point source pollution or contaminants that we knew of, etc. So here we go. The first thing to do is to start thinking like a bird, all right? And again, I'm trying at the end of the night go, how do we start thinking like raptors, all right? And it's not that hard. If I can do it, I think my brain's just a little bigger than a dinosaur brain, so it works, okay? That says, okay, we have to put some structure to it. We have to start putting a design together. We have to start using the scientific method and be serious about this. Otherwise, we could come out in 3 years and go, well, I don't know, there are dead birds out there, and it happens in nature, and that's fine, okay? So we look at a broad scale number of questions. What's the habitat? What's the productivity? How many babies and why? What's the behavior? We spend 618 hours sitting watching birds do what they do. What's the prey base? What kind of people are walking around? And is post-fledging. What happens after they leave the nest? Okay, if you and I were watching a raptor nest and they had 2 babies and I saw them at 35 days old and then we came back a week later and they're gone, 2 in the wind column. They fledged, right? No, not necessarily, okay? So here we go. I need some methods, real quick. I've got a light bulb changing pole. They're about that high and you can connect one onto another one. I took the light bulb changing dealie off and put what? A mirror up there. So you can see 2 eggs at the top of that little red arrow. We could use this for about 80% of the nest. Now we knew how many eggs were laid, how many were hatching, and so forth. Very quick and easy, up and out of there in 5 minutes. Okay? We also had to start climbing nests. So, and I'm going to come back for a minute, but these are what we would say is 80% of fledging age. Okay, you guys, these birds are coming out of an egg a little bit bigger than a chicken egg that you're going to crack tomorrow or the next day. And they're going to be bigger than their mom and dad in 35 days. All right? So we know when they're at about 80% of fledging age, we call it good. That's their success. All right? And we found something that was different. The post-fledging, what do they do after they leave the nest? We had to figure out a way to get at that. We put a tiny little transmitter, sewed it on with dental floss, so it would fall off in about 3 weeks, and boy, wait till you hear what happened at that point, okay? So, this is the way it would work every year. These beautiful little nestlings. This guy is really happy. His terrible brother or sister never even hatched that he had to deal with. They probably would have eaten him, okay? And his mom and dad are bringing a pile of food in. Perfect, okay? Until one day, I climb a nest. It's about 110 feet, west side of Blacktail Butte, if anyone's been to Jackson. And I'm all clipped in, and I count 2 babies, perfect, about ready to come down, and one of these little bugs, flies, lands on my hand. I go, look at that, a little black fly. No light bulb at all, remember? And then I'm about ready to come out of the nest, and another one lands on me, and I go, look at that, there's a red species and a black species. Well, the red one popped and squirted blood all over my hand. And I looked at the birds, and they're covered with red dots. And it was the only eureka moment I've ever had in my life. I said, that's got to be it. Okay? So, sure enough, we found that an entire population of red-tailed hawks in one season were wiped out. So I find this in one nest. Within the next 9 to 10 days, all 35 nests were infested with these black flies. Okay? So, what is it? It's a tiny little black fly. We also learned that they're going to transmit a blood protozoan. Okay? Now, the adults are flying around as latent carriers of this, what's called a leukocytozoan. She's sitting on eggs right near hatching time, and these little black flies come out of a larval stage right out of the creeks. And guess when they emerge? They got to float through the water column. They pop out and emerge into a flying insect. It's right when those eggs hatch. Okay? So this whole system's all in place. All right? We started taking blood out of babies. And we realized, and out of the adults. And we found out that the black fly would bite the adult, get a blood meal, just like a mosquito. Then we got these little babies sitting there that can't move. They're completely vulnerable. They bite the little baby for a blood meal, give that bird the protozoan, and then things collapsed from there. So this is what and I should back up. I meant these are native little insects. Okay, there's nothing weird about them. And the key point that I hope you all were asking yourself, they're sensitive to temperature. If we get a cold day, 50 degrees, that's cold where we are. 48 degrees, black flies go down into the nest, down into the grass, and aren't moving. Okay? Now we have a bird that's going to fly in 35 days. They're getting infested. It'd be like us being naked in a room full of mosquitoes. I mean, these birds were just panicked. And they eventually, as we'll see, they'll just bail out of the nest. They said, I'm out of here. Okay? So, but if you could get 3 or 4 days with no harassment, you're growing, 16% of your life in order to get out of that nest. So we found that cooler temperatures were great for little baby birds. Okay? If it was a hot, warm summer, like we've had many in the past, these birds are getting just wiped out. Okay, so real quick, I'll move through this. We have these black flies swarming around a nest. They're just harassing these birds. We'd watch them gawking around the nest and finally just fall off. So a lot of those baby birds we were finding below the nest were actually, died of trauma. They're just hitting branches, and it was terrible. Bad mess. Okay? And premature fledging, and they're gone. All right? We found that this blood protozoan is going in there, creating all kinds of havoc on organs, anemia. Okay? The little protozoan gets into as you know, birds have nucleated little red blood cells. And the protozoan would go into the nucleus and replicate and explode. So they're becoming totally anemic, okay? And then, of course, because of that, they're just dehydrated. And these data come from necropsies. So we were picking up all these birds, dead birds, one after another, shipping them off, and I would do all the necropsies with Dr. Williams at the vet lab in the state. of Wyoming. So just real quick to finish up the science piece, and again, I'm just trying to get into the head of raptors. And you all, this is on the left is the column of just on the number of eggs laid from 0 to roughly 2. Okay, but this is over an average of 10 years. Number of eggs that hatch, young, and actually migrate. That's a pretty typical scenario of most wild species. Okay, you read in most textbooks that there's a 70% mortality on first-year birds. There it is. Okay, and we found it, and we're now in our 23rd year of doing these, trying to create this data set. And so that's fine. If that's what you're doing, that's 3 years to replace a pair of red-tailed hawks. Okay? But more importantly is it's more fragile than we ever thought. Okay? Great system. Yep, so we lay a bunch of eggs, but we only crank a few out. That's fine. Well, as you all remember many, many years ago, if you interrupt that system, okay, they can lay eggs, but as the peregrine falcon story told us, they never hatched. The whole system collapsed. They almost were gone. Okay, in this case, black flies. All those birds, those eggs hatched, but they never left the nest. Okay, and then you can keep going. We found that 30. So it's incredible. These beautiful big birds would be fed all day long, and we'd watch the mom and dad bring food in when they're little, and they'll rip these little voles up and put a tiny little speck on one another's beak. So the one mate would put it, and then she would dip down, and the little bird would take it off of its beak, and it's like warm and cozy, and it's like they're not. They're totally killing machines, but here they are, you know. And you see this, and you go, oh, you're like, no, don't go there. So what we would find, you all, is that most 30%, 3 out of 10 birds that actually fly out of the nest are dead in the first 9 days. They're going to spend the first 8 to 10 days on the ground. It's like, you guys, you know, and so we're tracking them, right? We put the little transmitters, and I'm like, what are you doing on the ground? They're getting whacked by fox, coyotes, black bears. We actually found these. We found a transmitter in the poop of one of the animals, okay? So we knew what was going on, okay? We found one of the baby birds with a transmitter, and I'm tracking it, and it's right here on the ground. It'd be like on this stage, and I can't find it. And I'm like, this transmitter's not working, and I just sort of kicked the dirt, and here it was perfectly buried. You couldn't have even seen it. So, and this beautiful scrape, there's some animal, we don't know who's doing it. It was 3 of those. So here are this incredibly vulnerable period of time for these birds. So we go, how many fledged? Great, that's how many are in the system? No, not at all. Okay, and we did finalize a migration study, which was even more fascinating. Birds from Jackson going down to central and southern Mexico. Okay, put a transmitter on mom, there she goes. Beautiful story, all the way down through southern Utah, into Mexico. Great. What do you think the baby's doing? Okay, here's a baby red-tailed hawk. His whole world for 3.5 months is about the size of this campus. All right. Mom leaves. 3 weeks later, the baby, which we put a transmitter on, which is a terrible wager of an idea, because we know many of them don't make it. 3 weeks later, the baby leaves, stops in the same places. Not only that, its mother did, lands in the same field as its mother. 3.5 weeks later. Okay, and that's a story you'll read with many species of birds. That bird knew nothing about anything in the world. Lucky to still be alive. One day, takes off. Now the stopover points, right? Great, went to Mexico. What I care about is where did they stop and what happened there and what's happening to those stopover points. Does that make sense? If those are gone, the whole system's in trouble. Okay, that's all from a little study. So all the while I'm doing this research, I'm getting birds coming up from the valley because I don't know who. People learned that there's some knucklehead in the park doing bird research, and bring them that injured owl that you found off the street and off the road, and the bird that just hit a window. So I didn't know what I was doing at all. But I started seeing, remember, I'm now seeing the world through birds in a different way. The scientific perspective was one. Now I'm seeing a whole different, that birds are getting what? They're getting hit how? And I just wasn't entirely aware of this. The little x-ray, it's the only one I'll show. I'll spare you those. But But you all, if I'm a bird, so I'm sitting here, this is the wrist, okay? And that's what we're seeing. And you ding the wrist of a red tail or any eagle, a bald eagle, golden eagle, and you can't fix it. It's like, you guys, it's like denting a brand new car with a tiny little, and you throw the car out. It doesn't work, okay? We break certain bones in certain places of a 9, 10-pound golden eagle. They're grounded, they're done. That's it. There's no way. And it's, you know, you do this 22 years and you just go, stop. I can't do this anymore, okay? So, but at this time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to do something about it. Game and Federal Fish and Wildlife says, you know, to get permits, do you have handling experience? Yep, I can do that. Do you have a place to put your birds? I said, well, I got a cage, and I have a house. So you guys, for several years, over 10, my dear wife would tolerate. We had birds in the house. We had them in the living room, kitchen, bathroom. And it ended when my 3-year-old daughter sat there with her hands on her hips and said, it's time for me to take a bath, and you have an owl in the bathtub, and I can't take a bath. And I went, I think I'm done with this right here. And that is a true story. That is just what happened. So she'd kill me if I told her that story. So I then said, okay, let's try to take the next step. In the backyard, not hard. Had to get permits. The federal and the state require permitting for this. I'm a true believer in permits, and we can talk more about that why. And so off we go. That lasted for about 12 years, and then I became a biologist and naturalist at this 3 Creek Ranch in Jackson, Wyoming, and I've done great work there. They allowed me to build 4 of these beautiful chambers or mews. We filled those up right away. Now I'm splitting each one of those 4 ways. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And then riding my bike one day, I saw this old barn. And I'm like, aha. And I'm like, what can I do with that barn? But with a little nonprofit now, trying to generate, I think I raised about $200 the first year to help pay for food and medical bills and getting him out of the house. And that we formed a little nonprofit called the Teton Raptor Center. We formed a board. One of them is a builder. We converted that old machine shed into a beautiful, facility. So we have a full-on vet clinic. We have housing for 12, 13 birds. We just doubled this. We built a brand new barn just this past year. And so now we have a place. And this is our home. This is where now a new perspective started to really show up. Okay, what's going on in this sort of human-wildlife resource, interface. So you guys many have seen Raptor centers. It's not unique. But how does it work? So here's a great horned owl. This is known as owlie. This is that was the bird that showed up many, many years ago that was in the bathtub that is a nightmare of my life. But so she's still here with us 12 years later. What do? Bird gets hit by a car, sitting on the side of the road, out there with his siblings and mom. We can tell by plumage, if any of you are maps banders or anything like that, we can talk about that. So what am I going to do? I do 2 surgeries on the wrist, doesn't work. Okay, I rehab it. I find that it's non-releasable and non-flighted. Okay, I have more options. I can either euthanize it, which we have to do quite a bit, just terrible. I can transfer it to a zoo or anyone else who might want it, or I can say, hey, how about an education bird? All right, and many of you who maybe have done this, you know where it's going. It's great, I'll get the permits. Now I've got permits to do rehab, now I want for education, all right? And that's all great. 12 years later, that bird has been over 4,000 programs and probably close to 100,000 participants have been probably 3 feet away from Owlie here, all right? And so 3-year-old daughter, Owlie, that's where that came from. I couldn't change that one. And so now we had a way we had a hook. We had a way to captivate the audience. We kept it small. What is it we're trying to say? What's the message? And now we have something that really that doesn't capture your imagination. I mean, nothing will. I mean, these are purely wild birds. With many people, we'd go, where's the wildest place you've ever been? And they go, oh, let's see, Nepal, we went to Siberia. It's like, no, look inside the eyes of that owl And if you can't tell me, and if you can figure it out, I'd love to hear it. What is going on in that brain? Okay? That's the way we're going to start understanding what's going on in the environment. And I say that's the language that'll help us really get at how do we conserve what's left out there. Okay? And then we do rehab. And this isn't about the Raptor Center. Anyone can, it's about rehabbing, and it's about conservation projects that feed the education. So every time we have a group, I'm telling them more about these birds because you guys wouldn't believe it. There's people trapping all kinds of animals from beaver to muskrat, and guess who gets in those traps? I would never have guessed. Those are the kind of stories that we're continually adding to what the message is. It's all coming from within. So it's a big circle, okay? And who are they? It started with Owlie, and now we've expanded that. We have flighted birds, we have eagles. We're trying to get one of each species, representative species. Some are flighted, some are not, okay? All right, so it takes time and money to put together something like this, of course, and as a little nonprofit, it's just that we're fairly proud that we're able to earn income, okay? A nonprofit that can generate money and those are monies that we don't have to hold out the cup for, okay? So we started out with 100% donation. We're now at close to 35% our income, and we're going to continue to, that's one of our goals, is to increase that, okay? And we're putting most of, not all of our money into the programs, all right? So that's the financial piece. But it's really about us. It's about people who are willing to work on Christmas Day. These birds are coming in 24/7, and it's not just a labor of love. It's becomes more of it's not addictive. It's more of I want to stay engaged because each one of these cases or each one of these instances are really telling us. I'm getting a new story. I'm getting a new perspective. And we don't take, another injured bird on the road. It's a full suite of medical, a checklist. We're going through everything. We're doing fecal floats. We're taking blood. We're trying to understand what the population is doing. And after, we've been now 9 years of that data set's starting to build. And we're starting to get an idea. All right? So the encounters, the education, you all, is huge. This is where I think the greatest good is going on. We do rehab, but we're not going to help the whole population. We're mostly going to use that as a way to help certain birds that are in and around the human landscape. And if there's an owl that's nesting in someone's backyard that got into trouble and we can get that bird back on the wing, we're doing great. Okay? We have many birds that come in that people said, I watched an eagle whack that bird and it landed right there. That happens all day long. And we're more interested in the data set that we can collect from the human-wildlife interface. Where are they interacting with us, and what does that tell us? Okay, and we're banking that information. Education is the way to get at that, and we're doing it in many different ways. We can often have a captive audience with these live birds, and that's when we've realized that we really now have elevated what we're trying to do at a much higher level because we now have people's time and their attention. And if you've got those two and you don't have anything to say, you've wasted a lot of time and effort, okay? So we also have once a year, and we thought this is a great party. It's free, and we have over 1,200 people show up on a day. It's Father's Day every year. And we go, this is fun. Lots of kids. But we go, you know what? The message on that day is, you guys can get involved. And this is a huge source of where volunteers come from. We'll have 80 volunteers working this day with us. It's food and live music, and it's just a way to tell the community we are here. This is why, more importantly, okay? So this is, I'll move through this fairly quickly. This is, you guys, these birds we're getting innumerable birds being shot every year. People still in our area are shooting raptors, all right? That's hugely illegal. You get caught doing that, you're in big trouble. And they're still shooting eagles, all right? So we have all these birds protected under the Migratory Bird Species Act. We have bird eagle protection acts, okay, that will even trump that one. So people shooting birds, birds getting caught in traps. They're hitting windows. We're working with a number of different groups trying to look at glass. You guys, millions of birds are getting whacked in windows, right? But that's not why I'm here. And osprey, you all have many osprey here. They get tangled up in fishing line on the Snake River and over on the Teton River over in Idaho. So a little short story. This is a great one about a beautiful juvenile red-tailed hawk that was found on the side of the road, couldn't fly, and had all 80 feathers broken mid-shaft. And that only comes if you throw a raptor in a chicken coop. All right? Has anyone seen chickens? Their feathers look pretty bad. And if you're a raptor person or a falconer, you want the chrome to shine. You want a bird in what we call perfect feather condition. And that's how we want them when we let them go. And we have this. So I'm like, now it's in the fall. This bird's not going to fly. I have to now keep it over the winter because, as you know, all birds in the northern hemisphere are going to molt in the summer. All right? But I can't let it go once it molts. It has to be exercised. So you can take another feather of the exact same feather, stick it into the shaft that's broken midway, put a little thread through it and a little spot of glue, and it's called imping. Now we've given this bird a whole new set of feathers, and we started flying her. Okay, and then 1 year later, she molted all those out, and she looks like that. All right, that's just doing nothing more than putting a bird in the bathtub for a year and letting the bird do its thing. But we had to keep flying it. And how do you do that? It's called a creance. Okay, you put a bird on a long 200-foot string, and you fly him like a kite. And that's your little string, and you got to be able to run for a while to get another few yards out of the deal. And then at the end of that string, you kind of slowly bring them down, and you do this several times a day for weeks and weeks, and then you let her go. And what was interesting is we had a great little gathering, about 30, 40 people, and we banded her, and those things that we're supposed to do for the state, and we, little 10-year-old, let him go, and this bird took off, right? And at about 200 yards, I'm not kidding, he just goes... I'm not kidding. And then took off, circled back around and looked at us and gone, never to be seen again. So that's what you can do with a little bird with a dinosaur brain, right? So, okay, lead poisoning is a huge issue where we are. Bald eagles, of course, golden eagles, when they look like that on the ground, they're close to death. It's a terribly insidious problem. Probably many of you have seen that here, probably in birds. And a bird in an oxygen chamber that we had that a donor gave us for, and that's works miracles on injured birds. So this is something that we're seeing more and more and more. And here's a picture that we were involved with. This is all lead poisoning. From gunshots. And yes. Yep, and where is the gunshots coming from? So this is a bird that has to ingest lead. You can shoot it, put a lead pellet in its bone. Probably won't be a problem. They have to ingest it. And where are they doing that? In our area, in the western Wyoming and all of Wyoming, big game hunting is the deal. So we have what's known anyway, about a 20 or more than a 20% wound rate. Okay, so there's 4,000 or 5,000 hunters every year in just the greater Yellowstone. In Jackson, shooting 2,000 elk times 20, there's a lot of dead animals that are dying out in the woods with no hunter around, and they're totally game for eagles, both golden and bald eagles. What does that look like? If any of you are hunters, you use lead bullets, you're eating a lot of lead, okay? You can see the little fragments, the little pieces that have lit up in this deer carcass that was taken, all right? So you think you've cleaned out your animal. I've hunted for a long, long time, and it scares me to death right now. Okay, what do? We go ask the state, let's get rid of lead bullets. Any duck hunters, you know what the story there was, and let's go to copper bullets. So Grand Teton National Park has an elk hunt every fall, only national park with a hunt in it, and they asked every hunter to use copper bullets. Why didn't they demand that they use copper bullets? Good question. Okay, so lead is a big issue. We're now working with 2 other groups to try to get statewide. We're working with the governor. We're trying to get lead out of the system. This is one major source of it. Okay, and as you all know, we've removed it from gasoline, we've removed it from paint, but it's not out of the environment. And these birds keep telling us that. Every year we keep thinking, oh, good gracious, no more eagles with lead poisoning, and every year they keep showing up. And you see them on that little vet table and you go, you've got to be kidding me. And so that's a huge issue that's out there. Okay, beautiful little, what we call a boreal owl. Some of you may be familiar. We have 3 little ones, the saw-whet, the little pygmy owl, and the boreal. And this has the little light-colored beak. Beautiful little birds. Cavity nesting birds, right? They like to find cavities. They'll store food in cavities. So just remember this picture for a second, okay? So, change subjects for a minute. Everyone's seen one of these, little outhouse by a campground or a trailhead. They're great. They're everywhere. And they have a black pipe out the back. And that black pipe is part of what the company that makes it is the secret behind the sweet-smelling technology. All right. And what happens is that pipe's supposed to be facing south. It heats up, creates convective currents, and the sweet-smelling stuff goes out. Perfect. Okay. As you probably know where this is going, that looks a lot like a cavity. Okay, that picture you just saw, there she is. She's down in the vault toilet. All right, and they look like that. That's a pretty pathetic picture, isn't it? If I've ever seen one. Okay, I'll quickly change that. What's going on? All right. Friend at the Forest Service dropped me that photo 3 years ago, and we said, you have got to be kidding me. Okay, we found this over a number of instances. Then we said, how many vault toilets are on this landscape? There are tens of thousands of these. Okay, and we're going, what do we do? And a very simple solution, you guys. Whoever saw that? So, little Teton Raptor Center, there's 3.5 full-time employees and a couple of board members, and they fiddled around on the table and said, we're going to fix this. We created a cap. All right, and the company that makes, bless their hearts, that make the vault toilet have a cap. And we called them 2 years ago and said, send us 20 caps. We're going to fix this problem. $110 a piece. $14.50 to make this from a local metal shop in town, and he powder coats them. Okay, so we then say to Grand Teton National Park, we want to cap all 120 toilets. Done in 3 months. Went to Yellowstone Park, done. Went to the governor. We want them all through the state of Wyoming, done. Okay, a simple solution that any of us could have created, and it now went viral. It went to the national. We took this to the national, to the Forest Service. And last year, this is their biggest award ever. You guys, we're like nothing. We're a bunch of dirtballs at this Raptor Center, and they gave us this national award. It's now become a nationwide. We're requiring the company to now retrofit all of them, and any new ones that are made have to come with that lid, okay? And we created it such that the airflow was the same. They weren't going to lose their sweet-smelling technology, and so forth. And that's all it is, okay? And the way, well, thank you. That's great. That was terrific. I didn't expect that at all. So the way it works is we set it up where a group like Scouts or a birding club could call us and say, hey, we've realized that we've got 30 of these vaults that we want to cover. We sell them. We tell them how to create a volunteer system around it. It takes 3 screws and a ladder. It's kind of dangerous, but and you're done. And create what? Create awareness. Create awareness and awareness and awareness. So very simple, fun. We had so many people in our valley involved in this, from kids to adults to the bird club. And this is the couple in the middle that said, yeah, I'm going to build that for you. I'm going to make that. And so there we are. We're at over 4,000 screens now. We want probably by the next couple of years to be at 20,000. We're not even at the tip of the iceberg with this. And 14 states. Entire state of Wyoming, and that's good. That's a good start, okay? But boy, oh boy, are there a lot of open pipes on the landscape, okay? Poo-poo toilets, that's great. That's one of them. But this is just out of one set of pipes in Nevada, right, where all of that work's going on out there. And so that's another issue. Now we're going national. We're going to meet with, as we have in the past, with the people from Washington, D.C., and go, you guys got to do something. We've now shown that it's a problem, and they're now back to their wall going, guys, thanks a lot, right? But we can make a change, and it doesn't take much. So it's a big issue out there. Okay, another story is a little kestrel box project, not hard. We go into schools, the kids make them for us, for them. And the idea here is that there's a very, very serious data set showing that little kestrels, little falcons, are on the major decline. No one knows why yet. Okay, this is across the country in specific regions. So what the idea is, build boxes and put them in different habitat types, sagebrush on the edges, typically where falcons are going to be, and do that across the country. So we're now engaged in a bigger project, okay, a national kestrel box program, and then after so many years, we're going to try to compare. Okay, what are your kestrels doing in open meadows? Well, we've got this occupancy, and we have these kind of success rates, and trying to get a handle in an effective, cheap way as we can. So that's a project we're doing. You all know these birds, Osprey. Okay, another quick little vignette story that we're involved with is, so Osprey are incredibly unique animals. They're in their own family. Okay, they're not related to any other raptors. And I spent, I don't know, 20-some years in the park banding little baby red-tails and ravens, trying to get at the structure of who's related to who. Why is that nest over there successful every single year? They show up early. Those two get it going, and they are on eggs, and they're great. And this nest over, every year they crap out. They don't know what they're doing. They show up, and it's a mess, chaos. Okay? And we see this throughout the population. And I want to know who's related to who. And I couldn't get at that with bands. I put a little colored band, and I would band hundreds of these babies, and as we just showed, not many of them live. Okay? It totally failed. I stopped doing it. So one of our employees, who was mucking out bird chambers for 6 months, volunteering, I'm sitting there one day, and I go, Jen, how's it going? And I said, what did you do? He goes, oh, I have a PhD in conservation genetics. And I'm like, you what? I'm like, I need you bad. So I said, how do we get at this? She's a wonderful person, a true genetic genius. She goes, great, here's how we do it. So I said, let's start. And let's look at trying to get a genetic fingerprint, a microsatellite, from as many different birds as we can. All right? Hasn't been done. It's this weird group that no one really knows much about. And she just starts digging into the literature, and we go, great, let's get started. So she goes, we don't need blood. We don't need to climb any nest. We can do this completely non-invasive. Just pick up a feather. And at the very tip, the last 2 centimeters that fit inside the bird, where it came out of its bone when they molted a new feather, has skin cells on it. She goes, that's all I need. And so sure enough, we're now involved in this project. We stalled out with funding, which was a bummer, but we're now collecting microsatellites, a fingerprint on each bird. We have 180 nests. Now remember, the greater Yellowstone is a fairly intact system still. She does what? Digs into the literature and finds out that in Sweden, there was a population of osprey that were almost completely exterminated. They were shot and hunted. This is a fishing area, almost completely gone. The literature showed that those birds changed from a historic migratory path. They're exhibiting what's called polyandry. The females are mating with many, many different males. That's not normal. Okay, and she says, what's happening in an ecosystem where it's fairly intact and supposedly healthy? So now we're in a global project coming out of a person that was volunteering at our center. We're short on funding, but I think this is the key to understanding what's going on a level that we haven't been able to do through just observational science. I was the mud on the boots, standing out there watching everything. She's like, no, here, we can just get at a whole lot of more interesting questions. I'm like, okay, great, I should have known that 20 years ago. So this is a neat project that we're trying to get moving. We got it started and stalled out just a little bit. So to wrap it up a little bit is How do we see the world through the eyes of a raptor? We can look at it through science. We now know that populations are not I should say they're more fragile than we ever probably thought. It requires good people that want to go up and get things done and do things for a small little center. It requires a space to do good education, to try to get that hook and get people interested. And it requires doing tangible things like the Poo Poo Project or the DNA Project. And it's all trying to get you all to just, what is that interface between this future and these birds? And that's where the conservation is going to come from. If I think anyway, that the more projects, places, research that has the potential to be funded, that has the greatest amount of compelling, fascinating stories that all of us can understand, the more good conservation we're going to do. And I would suggest that those are the kind of projects, research, facilities, Raptor centers, that really need to be supported and funded, okay? Because I'm realizing that without the ability to just take experiences that are coming from true real-life experiences, who's going to listen? And if we have these birds, and they're now our ambassadors, they can't fly, and I've got them in front of people 3 feet away going, you look inside there. You want to know what's wild and where the answers are, it's in there. We just have to figure out how to listen to it and what they're telling us. And that's coming through stories in my mind, okay? And I think it's all about awareness, for sure. I can't hit anyone over the head and say, change your attitude or what you do, okay? And I would say the best starting point for all of us is just see more birds. If you see an osprey sitting on a pole, drive by, it's like, wait a minute. There was a population in Norway that are gone. Wait, I think I know something about that bird. All right, or you go to a campground and you're going to go on a hike and you look in that toilet and I look now, but they're not capped. I'm mad as hell, right? So, but it's just a little piece. It doesn't take much, and I think that's really the message tonight. I know I've taken a lot of time, but I really believe that raptors can, obviously there's a love for birds, but they're more than that, and I think all of us have the capacity and the ability to see, you just start seeing them. You know, the very kind woman, like, no, what is that? And I'm like, geez, are you kidding me? But that's okay. You know, the bottom line is to say, all right, let's help this person understand. And I can come at it, and our center can come at it from a science view. You wouldn't believe what happens. Out of 100 birds, you're going to have 12. They're actually going to, we have leucocytes only. You have these black flies. Or we can say, you know, from a conservation side. So that's really how I'd like to wrap it up, is have all of us go, what can we do? Just go see more birds. Just buy a pair of binoculars and just go out there and stop long enough and go, what's going on inside the head of that osprey or that hawk? And we'll all start getting somewhere down the road. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Is that okay? I would love to entertain some questions. I could sit here all night and talk about birds. So you raised your hand. That sound okay?
I have a couple of comments, couple of questions. You mentioned that the Snake River was being taken over the valley with spruce trees. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if it was because that did not allow for the open spaces and the open perches that the cottonwoods would give. Is that right?
Well, close. They're warm. What's happened is, does anyone know? We're damming rivers. Okay? Cottonwood is the native western riparian tree. Big, beautiful tree. They get heart rot. Birds can build cavities. It's beautiful. What happens is when we don't allow the annual flooding that rivers would do every year, that would create this sandy, open, any grass, that the seed of a cottonwood cannot grow unless it's an open substrate, sandy, right? We've now dammed across the western United States all these rivers. So what happens is they don't have the substrate to reproduce. Spruce trees come in and we've lost, some people say up to 70% of the cottonwood forest. I'm looking at, remember the question, I'm now thinking like a bird. I got all these birds to compete with. I need a diversity of habitats. It goes from cottonwood and spruce to just spruce. Now we're all in trouble. Okay, so it's all kind of, as long as we can start seeing that this stuff's not just pretty pictures and the park's beautiful, it's all kind of related. And it's not hard, you know, so that's the story of the cottonwood. And it's unfortunately not a very happy one. But we are restoring, we've built levees, okay, in many western rivers to keep the river from flooding. And now so that's dried up the whole riparian area, and spruce love that. And so now we've cut holes throughout the wet. So we're trying to get water. We've got to get that flood water back there, or else we're going to lose the cottonwoods for sure.
We have time for a couple more brief questions.
Yeah, I know, I took too long, dang it.
What's the research showing on the impact of windmill farms on bird populations?
Next question. No, that's great. It's a great one. We're trying to get involved in that. That is a huge issue. Big energy companies are trying to get what's called a take permit. Some of you probably. So if I own an energy company, I'm going to put up these windmills. The blades are 300 feet long. They're just massive, great big instruments on the landscape. And if you don't get a take permit, you're in big trouble. In Wyoming, they just resolved another case where there were hundreds of eagles picked up and there's a huge restitution going on, fund that we'll benefit from, but we'll take that money and try to put it into helping. I don't know what the solution is on that one yet, but there are tens of thousands of birds getting whacked in those things, and it just breaks my heart. I'm all for alternatives. I don't know yet. But our little center we're like, okay, what's next? Well, we'll just figure that. So I wish I could answer it. It's a conundrum. It's terrible. I'll talk to you more afterwards.
One more question.
Yeah. Anybody? Oh, sure.
I wonder which species of raptor you would prefer for your falcon work and training and hunting with falcons.
Yeah. Well, personally, I'm what's called a dirt hawker. So I like red-tailed hawks, and they're hunted right off the fist. So we're chasing things, and if they ever catch anything, I could care less. It's like I just like going out. The falconry really came into my life with injured birds, trying to go, okay, what does a healthy bird fly like right up close? So I hunt with them quite a bit. A merlin, I've flown merlins, but I want to know what a healthy bird flies like. And I can fly them right in my living room. I can play catch. I could have Ken in the back of the room and she'd fly, or Glenn. And I go, okay, now we have that bird on the crayons. And I go, is that bird, that's what it was really about for me personally. I have also flown some falcons, and I like to watch the birds right off the fist. That's really exciting for me. Okay, there was someone, one more, Ken.
Right,
I know, back here. One.
Is there any follow-up on the story of the flies? And is that a result of climate change, that we're having more warm weather and so the flies are going to just kill everything?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. We have followed up, and sure enough, we found so this is a graduate 3-year study. First year, it was a hot summer. It's the summer of 1992 in Jackson, Wyoming. Dry, no rain, and they wiped out almost 50% of the birds were gone. The next year was one of the coldest on record, and wettest and coolest, and they did beautifully. So I'm sitting here going, okay, I've got 2 years. Hey, I'm doing pretty good. 22 years later, we still don't have a handle on it. But then that's an indicator of those short little graduate projects. You think you're doing great, and well, you are. But so it's an indigenous native species. There's nothing we could do. We'd sit back and just watch this disaster hit. So we have now 12, 13 years or more of good observation. We pick, a certain number of nests and just watch. So it's an observational project still, yeah.
On this
So-
note, let's thank our speaker.
Yeah.